If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. The Ascent into Darkness, the Dyatlov Group's final expedition. Igor Dyatlov carefully folded the topographical map and tucked it into his backpack. The 23-year-old engineering student had spent months planning this expedition. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he gathered his team at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. The group was impressive. Each member had earned their place through years of mountain experience. Ludmila Dubinina wrote poetry, but could handle an ice axe with deadly precision. Zina Kolmogorova had conquered peaks that made grown men weep. Alexander Kolevatov studied physics by day and studied mountain weather by night. These were not weekend hikers. They were the elite of Soviet mountaineering culture. The plan seemed straightforward. Start from Sverdlovsk, travel north through remote settlements, then tackle Mount Otorten. The name meant "don't go there" in the local Mansi language. But the students laughed at superstition. They believed in maps and compasses, not folklore. On January 25, 1959, the 10 friends boarded a train. Their cameras captured smiling faces pressed against frosted windows. The journey took them through villages that grew smaller and more isolated. Children waved from doorways of wooden houses. Elderly faces watched from behind curtains. They documented everything. Photos of shared meals, diary entries about the bitter cold, notes about equipment checks and route decisions. Their meticulous records would later become evidence in a mystery that haunts Russia to this day. At Ivdel, they switched to a truck. The driver knew the country well. He warned them about the weather turning savage. But young people rarely listen to warnings about things they cannot yet imagine. The truck dropped them at Vizhai settlement. From here, they would ski into the wilderness. The temperature was dropping fast. Wind carved strange patterns in the snow. Then disaster struck the group before the real disaster began. Yuri Yudin fell ill. His back seized up with pain that made walking impossible. The others gathered around him, faces grim with concern. Should they cancel? Should they all turn back? Dyatlov made the call. Yudin would return to safety. The remaining 9 would continue toward their destiny on the mountain. Yudin later said goodbye was harder than he expected. Something felt different about this parting. His friends disappeared into the white forest, their laughter echoing between the trees. They made camp several times as they pushed deeper into the wilderness. Each night brought them closer to Mount Otorten. Each night took them further from civilization. On February 1st, they reached the slopes of Kolotsiakal. The mountain's name meant Dead Mountain in Mansi. The wind howled with unnatural fury. Snow whipped across the exposed ridge where they pitched their tent. Their final photographs show the tent being erected against the storm. The last diary entry mentions strong wind and poor visibility. Then silence fell over the mountain like a heavy blanket. The abandoned tent. Evidence of panic and flight. The searchers had been climbing through frozen wilderness for weeks. Their boots crunched through snow that seemed to stretch forever. When they finally spotted something orange against the white mountainside, their hearts raced. There it was, the tent that belonged to Igor Dyatlov and his group. But something was terribly wrong. The tent stood partially buried under snow, its bright fabric torn and hanging in strips. The searchers approached slowly, their breath forming clouds in the bitter cold. What they found inside made their blood freeze. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Long, jagged slashes ran through the fabric. Someone had used a knife or sharp tool to slice their way out. But why would anyone destroy their only shelter in such deadly conditions? Inside the tent, everything remained exactly as the hikers had left it. Warm coats hung neatly on hooks. Thick boots sat paired together. Food lay untouched in containers. Personal belongings were carefully arranged, as if the group had simply vanished mid-conversation. The searchers stared in disbelief. These experienced hikers had fled into a winter night wearing almost nothing. Some had left in just their underwear and thin socks. Outside the tent, the snow told an even stranger story. Footprints led away from the campsite in a single line. The tracks showed that some people had run barefoot through the snow. Others wore only socks or felt boots. Not one person had stopped to put on proper winter gear. The footprints headed straight down the mountain slope toward the dark forest below. They moved in an orderly fashion, not scattered like people running in panic. Yet these were clearly people fleeing something terrible. Rescuers examined every inch of the tent site. They looked for signs of an attack or struggle. They searched for evidence of wild animals or other threats. They found nothing. No claw marks, no bullet holes, no signs of violence from outsiders. Whatever had frightened these 9 experienced mountaineers had left no trace of itself behind. The discovery sent shockwaves through the search team. This was no longer a simple rescue mission. They were now dealing with something that defied explanation. What could have been so terrifying that trained hikers would choose certain death in the frozen wilderness over staying in their warm, safe tent? What had made them slice through their only protection and run half-naked into the night? The questions multiplied with each piece of evidence. The mystery was just beginning. Grisly discoveries, unexplained injuries, and strange phenomena. The rescue teams found them one by one, scattered across the frozen wilderness, like pieces of a broken puzzle. Each discovery brought more questions than answers. The first 5 bodies emerged from the snow in February, their skin pale and strange. They wore almost nothing in the brutal cold. Months passed before searchers located the remaining 4 hikers. These bodies lay buried deeper in a ravine, hidden beneath layers of ice and snow. What they found there would haunt investigators for decades. The medical examiner's reports read like something from a nightmare. 3 hikers had suffered massive internal damage. Their ribs were crushed, their skulls were fractured, yet their skin showed no marks of violence. No cuts, no bruises, nothing to explain the devastating injuries inside their bodies. The force needed to cause such damage would have been enormous. Think of a car crash or a building collapse. But there were no signs of such trauma on the outside. How does a person's chest get crushed without leaving a single mark on their skin? 2 victims were missing their eyes. Another had no tongue. The soft tissue was simply gone, removed with surgical precision. Wild animals might explain this, but something felt wrong. The cuts were too clean, too deliberate. Then came the most disturbing discovery of all. Some of the clothing contained high levels of radiation. The readings were far above normal levels for the area. Where had this contamination come from? The remote mountain held no nuclear facilities, no weapons testing sites, no logical source for such exposure. Several bodies showed unusual skin coloration. Their faces had turned orange and gray in patches. This wasn't typical frostbite damage. Medical experts had never seen anything quite like it. The sequence of discoveries painted a strange timeline. The hikers had fled their tent in panic, leaving behind warm clothes and supplies. They scattered in different directions across the mountainside. Some made it farther than others before the cold claimed them. But the injuries suggested something else had happened first. something that caused internal trauma so severe it defied explanation. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia for most victims. Yet the crushing injuries, the missing body parts, and the radiation readings told a different story. Each autopsy report raised new questions. Each forensic detail deepened the mystery. What force could cause such specific damage? What threat had driven 9 experienced hikers into the deadly cold without proper protection? The mountain kept its secrets well, leaving behind only broken bodies and impossible clues that continue to puzzle experts today. Shadows of Secrecy. The Soviet investigation and official mystification. The moment rescue teams returned with news of the 9 bodies, the Soviet machine began to move. Officials in Moscow received urgent reports. Something terrible had happened on the mountain, and now they had to explain it. Investigator Lev Ivanov arrived in the Urals with clear orders. Find out what killed these hikers. Make it simple. Make it final. But from his first day on the case, nothing was simple at all. The bodies told impossible stories. Lyudmila's tongue was missing. Her eyes were gone too. Georgy and Alexander had massive chest injuries, but no external wounds. Their ribs were crushed as if a truck had run over them. Yet there were no tire marks in the snow. Ivanov interviewed everyone he could find. Local hunters spoke of strange lights in the sky that night. Orange orbs floating above the mountain. Other hikers in the area reported seeing balls of fire moving through the darkness. The investigator wrote it all down, but his superiors grew nervous. The autopsies raised more questions than answers. The coroner found traces of radiation on some clothing. Not enough to kill, but enough to worry officials in Moscow. This was 1959. The Cold War was burning hot. Nuclear secrets were everywhere. Military officials began showing up at the investigation site. They asked questions about the case files. They wanted to know who had access to what information. Suddenly, witnesses became harder to find. Some refused to talk anymore. 3 months after starting his work, Ivanov received new orders. Close the case. Blame it on a compelling natural force. No need to specify what kind of force. The families could have their children back, but they couldn't have answers. The official report was thin. It mentioned an avalanche, but there was no evidence of one. It talked about panic, but couldn't explain the missing organs or crushed bones. Most importantly, it classified key evidence for the next 30 years. Family members who asked questions were told to stop. Journalists who wanted to investigate found their requests denied. The mountain itself was declared off-limits to hikers and researchers. A wall of silence grew around Dyatlov Pass. Ivanov himself seemed troubled by what he had been forced to conclude. Years later, he would hint at things he couldn't say officially. Military tests, he whispered. Secret weapons. Things that ordinary citizens weren't supposed to know about. The truth had become a state secret. But secrets have a way of growing larger in the darkness, becoming something more mysterious and terrifying than the original reality ever was. Theories and conspiracies, Avalanche, military, and beyond. The silence that followed the discovery sparked a wildfire of theories. Each explanation seemed to raise more questions than it answered. Scientists, conspiracy theorists, and amateur detectives all threw their ideas into the ring. The avalanche theory gained momentum in recent years. Researchers used computer models and physics calculations to show how a delayed snowslide could have struck the tent hours after the hikers cut their way out. The snow would have been heavy enough to cause panic, but light enough to leave the tent mostly intact. Yet critics point out that the slope wasn't steep enough for a natural avalanche. The experienced hikers would have known better than to camp in such a dangerous spot. Military experiments offer another compelling explanation. The area was close to nuclear testing sites. Strange orange lights had been reported in the sky that night by witnesses miles away. Some suggest the group stumbled upon a secret missile test or chemical weapons trial. The radiation found on some clothing adds weight to this theory, but military records from that time remain classified, leaving investigators to piece together fragments. The UFO explanation refuses to die. The orange lights, the strange injuries, and the missing eyes and tongues fuel speculation about alien encounters. Believers point to the lack of logical explanations for the bizarre injuries. Skeptics argue that natural decomposition and scavenger animals explain the missing soft tissue. Then there's the infrasound theory. Strong winds blowing over the mountain peaks can create low-frequency sound waves that humans can't hear but can feel. These waves allegedly cause panic, disorientation, and even hallucinations. The hikers might have fled their tent in terror from an invisible threat that existed only in their minds. Each theory has passionate supporters. Documentary makers have spent fortunes investigating every angle. Internet forums buzz with new evidence and heated debates. Independent researchers travel to the site each year, searching for clues the original investigators missed. The persistence of these theories reveals something deeper about human nature. We need answers, especially when facing the inexplicable. The more mysterious the case, the more creative our explanations become. The Dyatlov Pass incident has become a mirror reflecting our fears and fascinations. Government officials have tried to close the case multiple times. Each official explanation satisfies some people while creating new doubts in others. The Avalanche theory might explain the physical evidence, but it doesn't capture the eerie feeling that something more sinister happened on that frozen mountain. HTML. The legacy of mystery, unanswered questions, and enduring fascination. The snow still falls on Dyatlov Pass. Each winter covers the mountain slope where 9 young lives ended in ways that defy simple explanation. Yet, the mystery refuses to stay buried. Russian authorities have reopened the case multiple times. New investigators arrive with modern tools and fresh theories. They examine the evidence again. They measure radiation levels. They study wind patterns and avalanche data. Still, no single answer emerges that satisfies everyone. The families of the victims carry a different kind of burden. For decades, they have watched strangers debate the fate of their loved ones. Some find comfort in the continued attention. Others wish the world would let their children rest in peace. The questions never stop coming. Books fill library shelves with theories about that February night in 1959. Movies recreate the final days of the hikers. Podcasts dissect every detail of the investigation. Online forums buzz with amateur detectives sharing new ideas. Each creator believes they might hold the key to solving the puzzle. People from around the world make pilgrimages to the pass. They stand where the tent was found. They walk the paths the hikers took. Many leave flowers or small tokens. The mountain has become a shrine to mystery itself. Scientists continue to study the case files. Weather experts model the conditions that night. Medical professionals examine the autopsy reports with modern knowledge. Behavioral specialists analyze the hikers' decisions. Each field offers pieces of the puzzle, but the complete picture remains unclear. The Soviet government's secrecy made everything worse. Classified documents created suspicion. Missing evidence fueled conspiracy theories. Official explanations felt incomplete. Even today, some files remain sealed. New evidence occasionally surfaces. A photograph discovered in an archive. A witness who finally speaks. A document previously overlooked. Each discovery sparks fresh hope for answers. Yet the core mystery persists. Local guides still tell stories about strange lights in the sky. They speak of winds that sound like voices. They mention areas where compasses spin wildly. The mountain seems to hold its secrets close. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why we cannot let this story go. 9 people died on a winter mountain. Accidents happen in harsh places. Yet something about Dyatlov Pass captures our imagination in ways that other tragedies do not. The case represents something deeper about human nature. We need to understand. We require explanations. When faced with questions that have no clear answers, we create theories. We search for patterns. We refuse to accept that some things may forever remain beyond our knowledge. The mountain keeps its silence. The snow continues to fall. And somewhere in that frozen wilderness, the truth waits for someone clever enough to find it.